7 long years passed, but Maria never stopped waiting. Every day, she thought about the man who had shattered her family's peace, the man she once called her husband. He had been sent to prison for something unspeakable, something that tore Maria's world apart. Her daughter, Emma, had been left to pick up the pieces of her childhood, while Maria silently vowed to never let him get away with what he'd done. Now, with his release looming, Maria isn't the same woman she was when he walked into that prison. She's stronger, wiser, and ready to face him head-on. But this isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about a mother's love, the strength to fight for justice, and the scars that never truly fade. As the day of his freedom arrives, Maria's hands trembled as she stared at the calendar. The date of his release circled in bold red. Memories flooded back, some blurred by time, others as sharp as broken glass. Emma was only 10 when it happened, her innocent laughter replaced by silence, her bright eyes dimmed by fear. Maria had tried her best to be both a mother and a protector, but the damage had already been done. The court's decision to send him away brought some relief, but it didn't erase the pain he caused. Over the years, Maria pieced together a life for her and Emma, but the shadow of that man always lingered. She often wondered if Emma still thought about him, or if she had buried those memories deep. Now, with his release approaching, Maria couldn't help but feel a storm brewing. She wasn't just preparing for his return, she was preparing for what she had to do next. Maria must decide how far she's willing to go to protect her daughter. Maria had always been careful with her words around Emma. She didn't want to reopen wounds that had barely started to heal. But lately, Emma had grown distant, quieter than usual, and Maria couldn't shake the feeling that her daughter knew. Perhaps she had overheard a conversation or seen something that reminded her of the past. Emma was no longer that fragile little girl. At 17, she had her own battles to fight, but Maria couldn't tell if her daughter was ready to face the truth or the man who caused it all. Meanwhile, Maria's sleepless nights were filled with questions. Would he come looking for them? Could he still manipulate them like before? The weight of those thoughts gnawed at her, pushing her to prepare for every possibility. She started reaching out to people who knew him, people she once avoided. Everyone had a different version of who he'd become in prison, but Maria wasn't looking for closure. She was looking for answers. Every detail she uncovered only deepened her resolve, and the plan she had been quietly forming for years finally started to take shape. But with each step, the stakes grew higher, and Maria knew there was no turning back. The day finally arrived. Maria stood by the window, her eyes fixed on the street, watching every passing car as her heart pounded in her chest. Emma was upstairs, but Maria could feel her daughter's unease through the silence. She had avoided telling Emma too much, not wanting to frighten her, but the tension in the house spoke louder than words. They both knew something was coming. Maria's phone buzzed, a message from an old friend who had been keeping tabs. Asterisk, he's out, asterisk, just 2 words, but they hit her like a thunderclap. Maria's mind raced. Every moment she had prepared for was now staring her in the face. She couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that he wouldn't stay away, that his return would force open doors Maria had worked so hard to lock. As the hours dragged on, Maria felt the walls closing in. She checked the locks on the doors, her eyes darting to the clock. Nightfall came, and with it shadows crept across the room, stretching longer, darker. Then, a faint sound, a car engine slowing outside their home. Maria froze, her breath caught in her throat. Was it him? Had he found them already? She couldn't afford to panic now. Whatever happened next, she knew she had to be ready. Maria's pulse quickened as she peered through the curtain, her hands gripping the fabric tightly. A black sedan idled on the street, its headlights cutting through the darkness. She couldn't see the driver, but the car's presence felt deliberate. Was it him? Or someone sent by him? The not knowing was almost worse. Just as she reached for her phone to call the police, Emma appeared at the top of the stairs. "Mom," she called softly, her voice laced with fear. Maria turned, forcing herself to stay calm. "It's fine, honey. Go back upstairs, she said, but Emma didn't move. Her daughter's eyes flicked toward the window, and Maria realized she wasn't the only one on edge. The tension broke with the sound of a loud knock at the door. Maria's heart stopped. She hadn't expected him to be so bold, so fast. But as she approached the door, a second noise came from the back of the house, the creak of the side gate. Maria froze, torn between two threats. Was he trying to corner them? Her mind raced as she realized this wasn't just about her plan anymore. It was about survival, and the stakes were higher than ever. Maria's chest tightened as the knocks grew louder, each one echoing through the quiet house. She glanced toward the back, where the faint sound of footsteps confirmed her worst fear. There were two of them. Her mind raced as she whispered to Emma, "Stay upstairs. Lock your door and don't come out until I say." But Emma hesitated, her wide eyes filled with questions Maria didn't have time to answer. Summoning all her courage, Maria opened the front door slightly, just enough to see who was on the other side. It wasn't him. Instead, a stranger stood there, a man she didn't recognize, but whose demeanor sent chills down her spine. Before she could speak, he said, "Maria, we need to talk. It's about him." Behind her, the sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Someone was inside. Maria spun around just as the stranger pushed past her, his face urgent. "I'm here to help," he said quickly, his voice low but firm. It didn't make sense, but Maria didn't have time to argue. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy lamp, and moved toward the noise in the kitchen. When she entered, her heart stopped. There he was, standing in the dim light, his face twisted into a smug grin. "Miss me?" he said, his voice as venomous as ever. But before Maria could respond, the stranger appeared behind her, pulling a badge from his pocket. "It's over," he said, his voice commanding. The twist came like a lightning strike. The man who had haunted her for years hadn't just been released. He had been planning to run, and the stranger at her door was part of a team tracking him down. Maria's instincts had been right all along. He wasn't going to stop until he had control again. But in that moment, with the police finally stepping in and Emma safe upstairs, Maria felt a weight lift. She hadn't just survived, she had won. Yet, as the man was led away in handcuffs, he turned to Maria with a chilling smile and whispered, "This isn't over." The words echoed in her mind, leaving her to wonder if her fight was truly finished, or just beginning. As the police car disappeared into the night, Maria stood on the porch, her body trembling from the adrenaline. The house was quiet again, but the air still felt heavy. Emma crept downstairs, her face pale but curious. "Is he gone?" she whispered. Maria nodded, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "He's gone, and he's not coming back," she said, her voice steady despite the fear still lingering in her chest. For the first time in years, Maria felt a sense of closure, though she knew the scars would remain. Life wouldn't return to normal overnight, but she and Emma would face it together. They had survived, and that meant everything. As they locked the door and turned out the lights, Maria glanced out the window one last time. The street was empty, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe it was truly over.